Hello, I am Diego Lizarazo, an OpenShift technology advocate with Red Hat, and today I'm going to share with you an edited version of a presentation that I did a couple of days ago at Georgia State University. And basically, the entire point is to try to help people create their first game with Construct 2 for the global game jam that is going to take place in a couple of days this weekend. So I hope you enjoy. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to try to set up the expectations for what we're going to accomplish during this video. Basically, I'm assuming that you are starting to create video games, that you have interest in creating video games, but you don't really have much of a previous experience. So what we're going to use today is called Construct 2. That's the tool, the engine that we're going to be using. So and that's what I had here before. You see, Construct 2. You can search for it, it will get you there, and if not, you have the page here, so Sira or Skira.com. I don't know exactly which one is the correct pronunciation, and you can just download it here as a free download. Okay, so that's the one that I recommend, and you can do it really easy for the global game jam. Just download Construct 2, follow my video, and you're going to be able to create a small game by the end of it. One of the cool things that you have with this Sira is, or with Construct 2, is that you have tutorials. So you just go here and you have several beginner tutorials. You can follow them and you're going to be able to learn several things similar to what we are going to do here. Not exactly the same, but some of the same principles. Now, if you open Construct for the first time, you're going to have something like this or something similar. Sometimes here you have like a dialogue, a welcoming dialogue that is going to let you know that, well, the options that you have, the things that you can use to create a new game. In this particular case, what we're going to do is just like File, click on File, then New, and you have several options. So some of the things that I showed in the presentation at GSU, I'm going to cut it here, and I'm just going to go for the meat of this video, that is to create a new empty project. So that's the first option. You just click on Open. You have something like this. So first thing to note is that you have this canvas, this empty canvas, all this white area, and this is your word, your game word. And this dotted line that you have here, that I'm zooming in right now, that's basically the area that is going to be shown in your screen when you're playing your game. So really, for this game that we're going to create, we're going to use that area, and that's going to be pretty much it. Okay, we don't really need much. It's going to be a simple game, and we want everything to fit on our screen. So I'm just going to move it something like this, and you should be able to see everything that we have. Right? Now, the first thing that you can do is to create a sprite. So basically a sprite is just a visual representation, a graphic representation of a game element. So let's say in the classic Mario Bros games, it would be Mario. Mario, it's a sprite, and also some of the enemies and some of the elements that you have in the background. So how do we do that? We just have to double click, and we have a list of elements that we can add. The one that we want is this one, Sprite, right? But if the list is too long and you're not able to find what you are looking for, you just have to go here to the search box and type Sprite. So the one that I want is this one, Sprite. So here we have a small editor, and we can create our own sprite. So I'm going to show some of the options that we have. First one, the simplest one, is just to pick a color and use the paint bucket to color it all. So we are going to end up with a small, well, square that we can change, and we can rotate, and we can basically do whatever we want with it. But quite likely your game is going to have more than that, right? So I'm going to add another sprite. And in this case, what I'm going to do is just, and obviously this is not really what most cases you will do, is to actually draw your own sprite. That's why you have an editor here, right? So you can do something like this. Of course, this is not really great, and it's not the sprite that we're going to use, but it's just to show you what you can do really easy. So you have it here, and again, you can modify the size and make it a little smaller and do whatever you want with it. Now, quite likely what you're going to do is use another editor that it could be, well, Paint for all I know, or Photoshop, or GIMP if you want to go for like a free option, and you are going to create that image that you want, something that is really nice, and you're going to, well, make it your own game. Now, to do something a little bit better for this presentation, I created really quickly two small assets, two small images that we're going to use here, and you see them. Obviously you can imagine where I took inspiration for this one. Since it's for educational purposes, I guess I can use them, but of course this is not a game that I'm going to publish, right? This is not something that I'm going to profit from, but I thought that it would be cool to have something like this. So if you want to use those two images, we have two options. The first one is to repeat the process that we did before. That is to double click, look for a sprite, say that I'm going to put it here, and after that you just double click here. So I don't remember the location of these two sprites, so I'm going to copy that and say, I'll copy it here, and we're going to have something like this, the two images. So I'm going to pick the enemy. This is going to be our enemy, and we can just close it, and we have it already in our game, right? The other option that I have is to just pick the image and drag it and drop it if I already have something like this. So this also works. Now, since I already showed you this, and I don't really need to use these two, they were just examples, so I'm going to move them away. And one of the things that you're going to notice is that everything that does not appear in the dotted area, what is delimited here, is not going to be shown on the screen for the player. So how this thing works: when you're ready, you just have to press here, Run Layout, or press F5. You see, well, you don't see it there, but in a PC you can press F5, and this is going to open a browser. In this case is the one that is there by default, that is Edge, and it's going to show you what you have there. So you see everything that I had on my dotted area appears there. Had I moved this a little bit in, something like this, it should appear on my screen. So that goes there. You see? I'm going to move it back. Now, what I want to do really is to make this enemy a little smaller, and our Centennial Eagle is going to be here in the corner, right? Something like this. But that's fine. One problem that we have right now with our game is that we don't have movement, we don't have interaction, we don't have input. So this is not really a game. This is just, well, an HTML page basically that has some JavaScript that is not really doing anything. So we want to start adding some elements to our game, right? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go here to my sprite, and you see that I can select it here in this list of objects, or I can just select it here. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to say that this is the enemy, and this is going to, I'm just going to call it Eagle, right? Eagle. The other two I'm just going to leave it there, but we don't really need them, like I said. And the game that I want to create is going to be a tapping game. So let's call this one the tapping escape. So our Centennial Eagle is going to be escaping from these enemies that are really fast, and they are kind of like suicidal enemies. They are going to come to the Eagle, and they are going to try to crash against our main character. And really what I'm going to try to do is to allow the player to tap on the enemies to destroy them, right? So at some point we're going to have like many enemies coming at me, coming at my character, and you just have to click on them or tap on them if it's a touch screen, and we're going to be able to destroy them before they reach my main character. So the first thing that I need to do is to make the enemy move. In other engines, in other platforms, I would have to actually code movement. With Construct 2, and this is why it's really good for like a game jam to create your own game, is that there are many things that already come with. There are many behaviors. And you access those behaviors of an element on the left side. So whenever you pick an element, that could be here, or even could be the project, you're going to see on the left side the properties. It says here. And you see that you have like the name of the enemy, well, or in this case, enemy. You also see things like the angle, the position, the opacity, the size. So if I move it, you're going to notice that it's changing. You see? This is changing at the same time that I'm using my keyboard to move the enemy. So it's because it's obviously showing the properties that we have at any given time. There, in the middle of that, you have this section that is the behaviors, and this little link that is going to show you a list. In this case, it's an empty list, so we're going to use the plus sign to add a new behavior. The one that I want to use is this one called bullet. Again, if you don't find it, you just can type here and you're going to find bullet. Double click and close. Now on the properties, we see that we have a behavior that has some attributes. So it has, the bullet has a speed, acceleration, gravity, bounce of solids. So there are many things that you can modify. Depending on the behavior, you can modify some things, and other behaviors basically don't have much to modify. In this case, we have several things. So let's test this small change. And you see that now my enemy is moving. It's moving in a straight line, basically just like a bullet, right? So it has a direction and it's moving in that direction at the same time. Now, well, it's a great improvement, but we have only one enemy. This would be really boring, and if we were able to destroy an enemy, it would be a game that is over in just a few seconds. So what we want to do is to create more enemies. So the first way that you can create enemies is to make copies of this one that we have here. And really this is something that I want to show you because it's important to know how to use it with Construct 2, but this is not how we are going to do it for the final version. How you copy, how you clone this enemy is press the Control key, your keyboard, so Control, and without letting go, you drag it. And that makes a copy of your enemy. Okay, you see I'm dragging and I let go of the key and the mouse at the same time that I locate that. The cool thing is that these two copies that I created, they also have the bullet behavior. So now if I test this, I have 3 enemies that are moving at the same time. Okay, so that's quite cool. Also, one thing that I can do is to move the enemies a little bit out. So I can do something like this. What do I know? Something like that. So they are going to be out of the screen, and then when I run my layout, when I run my game, they're going to appear like coming at my enemy, well, on my character at the same time. So that's really good. But in reality, I could keep copying, making copies of this enemy, and still it would take me forever to create as many copies as I really need. Let's suppose that I want to play for 10 minutes, so I would have to make hundreds of copies of these enemies to make it interesting. So what we're going to do is to introduce the events for the game. So we have been working on this tab that we have here. Now we're going to just move to this other one that is the event. So I'm going to move here. Here we can add an event. So what is this? What is an event in Construct 2? It's basically just a question. So it's going to be, if you have programmed anything at all in your life, this is going to be an if then else. If something happens, execute an action. So what we want to do is that every second, let's say every second, I want to create a new enemy. And then that new enemy is going to have a bullet behavior and is going to move over here. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to add an event and I'm going to ask the question, or add the event, the trigger for my action. So in this question I'm going to use system, that is the one that I can use to ask about the passage of time. So system. And you see that here we have all the elements that we added. So the eagle, the enemy, and these two sprites that we had. But the system is the one that you can ask things about where you're running your game, that it could be the browser or a phone or your computer, etc., etc. So what I want to do here is to look for every, and you see that I'm typing, and it's this one, every X seconds. So in this example, it's giving you by default 1 second, so you can modify it and say, like, I don't know, 1.1 second or just 0.9 seconds or 3 or 4 or 5. You can modify this, right? So I'm just going to say every 0.9 seconds. It doesn't really matter. So this is the question, or this is the trigger that we're going to have. Now we need an action. Do something every 0.9 seconds. In this case, it's going to be to create a new enemy. Again, usually the enemy cannot create itself, so we go to system that is able to create new enemies. So we have a keyword that is create, and it's called create object. Okay, so create object. Now it's going to ask us a few questions. So which object do you want to create? This particular case, I want to create an enemy. So you just have to click, again, click to choose, so click, and then pick the enemy, right? For a second, we're just going to leave these two, these other attributes as it is. I'm just going to say done. And we have our first event, that it has a question or a trigger and an action. So let's test that. First we're going to have the 3 ones that we had, and then we're going to create every 0.9 seconds a new enemy up here, right? But why there? And obviously I don't think that's a good position. So why there? Well, simply because here we're saying create an enemy at position x0, y0, and that's basically the corner of our screen. 0, 0 is this corner. Y in our screens augments downwards. It's not exactly like in coordinate, like what you would have in math, in geometry, that it goes upwards. So no, here on the screen this is 0, 0, and it augments downwards. So that means that it's being created here. So that's correct, we have done that, but perhaps that's not really what we want. What we would really like to do is to create enemies randomly out of the screen. Something like one time here, other time here, other time there, something like in a range. Perhaps something like here. This is position 50, so let's say 50, all the way to, what is it, 430, and something randomly in that range, okay? So I'm going to move it here. So what I'm going to say, I'm going to modify, so I double click, is I'm going to change the Y position. And to pick a random position, we can use a function that already is integrated on a constructor that is called, guess what, random. And as soon as I start typing, it gives me the option, it gives me the help, like, hey, perhaps this is what you want. And yes, that's what I want. And it's showing me here a little red underline, is because it's not done. I haven't finished it correctly, because I have to open parentheses and then give parameters to this random function, right? So we say that it was going to be between 50 and 430. So I say 50, 430, then close parentheses, and then it should be okay. Now you see that there is no red underline, so I can do it correctly. Now I can do it also on x equals 0, but that's not great position, so let's say minus 50. And let's go with that and see how it works. So the first 3, and look at that. Now the new enemies appear in different positions. I don't really have much control, and you see that sometimes they tend to repeat or whatever, but it's random. The player would not really know where the next enemy is going to come from, right? And some enemies look like if they are doing it correctly. They are close to the enemy, they are flying towards the enemy, and that's really awesome. But there are many others that seem to be missing the enemy, my player. For example, this one would have not crashed against my eagle. So let's change that. What if we say that when we create an enemy, we're going to make it point towards my eagle that is here, something like that. And I'm going to do it manually for these two because these are not really going to be affected by this. They are already created. So I'm going to make this one something like this and see how that goes. But for the other ones, I could say, hey, I want to add another action. This is kind of cool. You can add more than one action to every event. And this is going to affect the enemy. So this time I do pick the enemy. And I can say, hey, rotate toward a certain position. And I could say the number of degrees. Well, I don't really want that. I really want set angle toward position. That's the one. I don't really want to calculate how much it is. I want to set the angle towards that position. So the position would be the position of the eagle, right? So I could go and find out that position. I just have to click on the eagle and I have the position here. But if I move it afterwards, that's going to be hard-coded. That's not what I want. What I want to do is doing something like this. Eagle, and you see, it detects that it's an object that we already added to the game. Dot X. And then I can say eagle dot Y. So I already have the position of that. So let's see how this works. Okay, well, that one was too much. That was one of the original ones. But you see that then the new enemies tend to follow the player, tend to follow where the player is supposed to be. So that's really, really cool, right? So now they really seem to be aiming towards my player, and they really seem to be bent on destruction. So they are a little bit more aggressive now. So I like that. I'm going to modify this one, I guess. Something like this. I think it was too much before, but it's fine. So now what do? We have moving enemies, but I still don't have the option to destroy those enemies. They are going to come and try to attack my eagle, my centennial eagle, but they do not have any way to, the player does not have any way to try to attack the enemies. So to do that, I am going to add input. So I am going to double click. Again, we have a list of things. In this case, I'm going to look for the input section that we have here. So we have gamepad, keyboard, mouse, touch. And if you had like an Xbox controller, you could make your own game and use the gamepad and, well, basically program what you want to do with the different buttons that you have there. And the keyboard, we may use it a little bit later, but it works okay. So right now what I would like to use is one of this, or mouse or touch. And I'm going to go for touch. Why touch and not mouse? It's because when you add touch, that should appear here on your project, you also have the input for the mouse. You can do it separately and you can say no, but by default it says yes. Because on Construct 2, all the games that you are creating are supposed to be multi-platform. So they could go and be run on a PC or a Mac, but also they could appear on a tablet or a phone. So those do not have mouse, right? But they do have a touch screen. So and the thing is that both of them work quite similarly. Whenever you do click somewhere, it's almost like if you were touching, well, you were touching the screen there. So it does not really matter. So that's why I prefer to use touch and just make the game already like touch ready. Okay. After that, what can we do? And I think this is going to be the end of the first video to make it quite simple. I'm going to add another event, and I'm going to ask about touch. In this case, I am going to ask if an object has been touched, so on touch object. And here I am going to specify that is the enemy. Okay. So this is the action. When I touch or click an enemy, the action that I want is also affecting the enemy, and is going to be called destroy. So quite to the point. So destroy. Now let's test. I'm almost certain that this is going to be too fast for my presentation, so I'm going to say, instead of like the speed 400, I'm going to say 200. So they are going to look really slow, but it's better for me for, well, explaining that it is slow, so I actually have a chance to destroy them. So there you go. Oops. Oh, come on. There. Oh, come on. There. And you see that I'm able to destroy now the enemies, if I'm good enough to use this mouse and actually click on them. But well, it kind of works, right? And well, the ones that I'm not able to touch, they're able to hit my Centennial Falcon. This is the end of part 1 of this video on how to create video games. And part 2, we're going to take what we created in this part. We're going to add a couple more things to make the game more interesting, not just a couple of images moving. And in part 3, we're going to do a couple more of things that are not exactly video game related, but I think round up the series quite well. Also, it's something that I did in the original presentation, and it would be quite good to share all that with you guys. You guys can see my Twitter, YouTube channel, my website, and everything else. So I would really love to hear from you, to have some of your feedback, and keep tuned for parts 2 and 3.